Um, Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to introduce. I must apologize because there's been a slight change in the agenda. So we'll be having the second session first, and then Mr. Ayere would come and speak to us about alternative financing opportunities. But first, we'll be talking about developing a smart marketplace, and we've gotten Dr. Andrew Nevin from PwC. He's a partner and chief economist with over 30 years of experience under his belt, a great strategy consultant, and author of several published write-ups by PwC. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and give a warm welcome to Andrew.
Thank you to Detail Commercial Solicitors. Great pleasure to be here. I have never been in this building, but it's really a very beautiful building. We've got a good turnout this morning. Those who don't know me, as kindly introduced, I'm Andrew from PwC. I've been working in Nigeria for 10 years. I've lived here for 6 years. I'm paid in Naira. I pay my own car. I pay my own house. I have a mortgage at 21%. I won't tell you which bank it is. And if things go sideways in Nigeria, I have nowhere to go except my brother's basement in rural Canada. And last winter it got as cold as -35. So I definitely want Nigeria to succeed. So thank you, everyone. I was asked to talk about PropTech. So that's what I'll do. I'll focus, but I mainly focus around sort of the implications of the blockchain on the situation. But I want to start. Is there a little clicker? I wanted to start. I mean, I don't know if you notice when the so this is not a criticism of anyone, but when the Minister of Trade comes out or the Finance Minister, they're always talking about SMEs or power sector or this sector or that sector. I think our view, which we've been really advocating for the past 3 to 6 months, is the most important sector to Nigeria is the real estate sector. It is by far the largest sector in the world. Everyone needs a place to live. Every business, even if you're an internet business, needs a place to operate on it. And I think this slide, can people see these slides or sort of? So this looks at all of the assets in the world for real estate, all of them for equities and debt, and this is GDP. And the total amount of assets in real estate are much higher than any other asset. And I think some people don't recognize that. Of course, the assets are a little bit different. They're not liquid in many cases. I mean, you own your house or that. But basically, what we have been saying, as I said, more and more vocally over the last number of months, is if the real estate market doesn't work, the economy is not going to work. There's no other sector that can compensate for it. The other thing about it, I mean, I grew up in Canada as a child in the 60s. You know, my parents bought a house. What drove the economic development of Canada, the United States, certainly, was the real estate sector. I mean, the post-war baby boom. You then had mechanisms that allow people to buy residential property. When you buy residential property, you then go out and invest. You buy furniture, you improve your house, etc. So basically, if the property market does not work, then the economy will not work. The other part of it is we need to create 4 million jobs a year in Nigeria. If we don't create 4 million jobs a year, we're just going to have increasing poverty, increasing youth unemployment. And the sector that creates the most jobs is real estate. Why? Because every time you have a real estate project, you need people to do the land, you need the people who build, masonry, electricians, carpenters, you need caterers to feed people when they're working, furniture builders, because when people get houses, they're going to furnish it. So we have been very vocal about this. I hope everyone in this room will be equally vocal when you talk to government officials, that if we don't get the real estate market working in a sense. I don't want to say it doesn't matter about the other sectors, but the other sectors cannot compensate for a real estate sector that's not functioning. So how does technology fit into all of this? I mean, I think the number one idea I'd like to leave everyone with is that technology changes the relationship between physical assets and financial assets. And I hope changes it in a way that's positive for the world. But I mean, everyone I think knows this example. The old style model of a hotel chain that owns its bricks and mortar, or at least arranges the financing on the bricks and mortar, like Hilton, compared to something like Airbnb, which is now a larger hotel chain or larger accommodation organization, even though it doesn't have any physical assets. Uber's the largest car service. It doesn't have any cars, etc. And there's lots of elements of that, but the number one thing I think for our group here today is that relationship between a physical asset and a financial asset on that. And the technology allows us to change that relationship in very clever ways, which I'll discuss. So lots of different things that PwC has intellectual capital around some of these things here. As I said, I'm going to focus today mainly on blockchain. But if anyone's interested, I mean, most of these materials are public. I'm happy to discuss some of the other things. I mean, I have been told by our PropTech people that drones are a big issue, because if you can have delivery to your house by drones, it takes vehicles off the road. So it fundamentally changes the way a city will work. So we'll see if that happens on that. But what I wanted to focus today mainly on was blockchain. Okay, so you've all heard about blockchain. What is special? I'm a big believer in this technology. We've been speaking about it a lot. And what is special about blockchain? Blockchain is a distributed ledger where the veracity of the ledger is verified through some mechanisms that make it tamper-proof. And you have multiple parties working off the same ledger. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but if you think about it for a moment, when you have a bank account, the bank is holding that private ledger, right? You don't have money. Unless the bank says you have money, you don't have money. Do you understand that concept? So if the bank, how hard is it to get corrected? For you to go down and explain to the bank, actually your ledger is not correct. You know, you need to give me back that I didn't get 20,000 naira or 10,000 naira out of the ATM. Their ledger says you did, and it's their ledger as a private ledger that's the single version of the truth. A distributed ledger, like a blockchain, the purpose of it is so that all the parties involved in it have one single version of the truth. And when you have one single version of the truth, it's a lot easier to do commercial transactions on that. Now, there's two types of blockchains. One is permissioned, which is essentially there's only certain parties that can look at it who are involved. Say, so if it was the real estate industry, it would be the tenants, the mortgagers, the developer, the tax authorities, et cetera, would be permission to look at it. And then there's a public blockchain. What's the most famous public blockchain in the world? It's Bitcoin, right? So Bitcoin is totally public. You can go punch it out and you can see every transaction and you can see the IP address of who owns the Bitcoin. And of course, people say Bitcoin's anonymous, but that's actually not true, because you can track down. There are other cryptocurrencies that are truly anonymous, but Bitcoin is not. If you want to be a criminal, don't use Bitcoin, because there have been criminals that have been tracked to their IP address. It's not that difficult on that. So that's a public ledger. Most of the ledgers in this area are going to be permission blockchains, where it's just the parties who are involved in the sort of ecosystem all have the same information. So, just at a very high level overview, and everyone will get this assigned. As I said, it's a decentralized ledger. And then the point is that because it's decentralized and you're all working to the rules of the game in a sense, the transactions are verified not by one party, but in effect by the system. And you might have heard this term trustless. You heard this term trustless? The reason it's called trustless is you don't have to trust the other party to do a transaction, because the system in a sense is self-regulating with that, making sure that everyone is following the rules, and when it's updated, everyone's followed the rules and the update is tamper-proof and everyone can see it. And these are the different elements of it. So we've got a distributed ledger. You've all heard of cryptography. Consensus is the fact that the network, the miners, or whoever is doing the verification verifies that you're working according to the rules. And then the final part is something called smart contracts. So how many people here have heard of smart contracts? You heard that term? So what is a smart contract? A smart contract is a contract that executes itself under certain conditions. And it's a very critical concept that we would like to see, and I personally would like to see brought into Nigeria. So let me give you the best simple example I know. So how many people here buy flight insurance when they fly, like insurance in case you're late, 4 hours late, 8 hours late, you have expenses? Does anyone buy it? Why don't you buy it, Sonny? It's a headache, right? Like, what are you going to do, right? So you're going to file the paperwork, and you're just, okay. So AXA, which of course here is AXA Mansard, but AXA in France, have a product. When you buy the insurance, what they do is then you've given your bank account details and your details. They download the flight data. If your flight's late, the money's in your bank account when you land. So you think about that. The contract is in effect executed itself. Now, we wish we had smart contracts at PwC because some of our clients, and maybe some who are in this room, we execute our part, they accept it, and then they don't pay us, right? And as lawyers, you have the same thing, right? Don't you wish you had smart contracts? So if you fulfilled your condition, automatically you would get paid on that. But you think about how this works in the real estate market. So in fact, give you another example that a small company that I've seen recently. So they have a solar product, right? And the person pays to recharge the battery, 500 naira. Now, where does that money have to go? It has to go to pay for the physical capital. It needs to go to the technology provider. It needs to go to the person who, like the cabin operator for the battery. So the way that they've set this up on the block, so that everyone can see every time a battery is charged, and then when the payment's made, the payment is automatically split to the various parties. Has to wait. No one has to submit an invoice because it's all generated on the system, and you can imagine how powerful that is for building up trust in the system, right? So why don't you want to be a capital provider to a business like that? Because you're worried that even if it's successful, how do you know you're actually going to get repaid? But if the person setting up the system sets it up so that you have the visibility of the blockchain to all the people in the ecosystem, and then they know that it's essentially a smart contract, that the payment is automated, then it becomes a much more powerful way to get financing. And one of the things that I haven't said publicly much, but I want to talk more and more about it in the future is, we need capital in Africa. We need capital in Nigeria. We've talked about that for a long time. One of the ways we're going to get capital is to create more systems that create trust to capital providers outside of Nigeria, that if they provide the capital, they're going to get paid. And smart contracts are an incredibly critical way of doing that, because with a smart contract, if certain conditions happen, you're going to get your money. The other people, for example, in this a real estate system, it's very important too, is the tax authorities. They would like to know that when the rent's on that. So this concept of the blockchain combined with smart contracts really for us is the foundation of a much stronger real estate system in the country, or actually let me say in the state. So let me just wrap up, maybe take one or two questions if people want, or Sonny I know has to speak, but we are pushing very hard. As I said before, we're starting to say publicly, if the real estate system doesn't work, the economy is not going to work, we're not going to have employment. The real estate system cannot work without a proper land registry. It is just a mathematical impossibility. Why? Because if you don't know that you own the land, you're not going to improve it. If the bank doesn't know you own the land, they're not going to lend against it. If the securities market doesn't know you own the land, they're not going to securitize it. and create liquid assets that can be traded among people. So at the core, I mean, we have been 3 to 6 months saying that the land registry is the single most important economic policy, and of course it's a state policy of the Lagos government. And just caveat, we actually are doing the land registry with the governor here, but it has to get done. And because we're having a conference this morning about real estate. Real estate is not going to advance without the land registry. But then we're adding the part that we say, look, given that, let's leapfrog. So when I was, first time I was in West Africa was 1988, and I was in Kumasi. I don't know how many people have been to Kumasi in Ghana, but all of you are, almost all of you, maybe not Sunny, but are too young to remember how difficult it was in the Ghanaian economy in 1988. Gold price was an all-time low. Jerry Rawlings was the president. I was up in northern Ghana, obviously very, very poor at that time. Kumasi is implementing a blockchain land registry on that. And I can't sit here sitting as a Lagosian. I mean, some people say, I'm not really Nigerian. I'm a Lagosian, right? Today I have to go to Abuja. I'm really upset. I hate going to Abuja. I hate leaving Lagos. But if Kumasi can have a blockchain-enabled land registry, we can have a blockchain-enabled land registry. And of course, one of the things about it is that from the state's viewpoint, the registry and the blockchain enable it really helps their tax revenue. So that's very appealing. So I think it'll get done with it. But if we don't get this done, and everyone in this room needs to be an advocate, I really fear for the economy of the country. As I said, we need to create 4 million jobs a year. I don't know, you've all heard we've come out of recession. I mean, our view is we haven't come out of recession, right? I mean, we have population growth of 2.7% a year. We might do 2% growth in 2018. 2% growth in 2019 is what the IMF is saying. So that means we will have gone 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 with declining income per capita. Now, how many years can we go declining income per capita before we have a social calamity? I don't think too many more, and this is the single most important policy for that. So this is just a little bit more detail about that, on that. Obviously, you get all the slides. I can get more stuff on other topics like the AI and the drones if people are interested on that. But let me just stop at this point, and I'll turn it over to Sunny. But as I said, we cannot see the country moving forward without getting this land registry issue organized properly. And as I said, I'd like everyone in this room to be an advocate for that, because if we don't understand it, if we don't get there, we really are going to have a social crisis. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nevin. We'll be taking just 2 questions for the session. So if you have a question, kindly indicate by raising your hand. We'll just take 2 questions.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bolex. Thank you, Dr. Nevin, for your time. My question is there an international standard for the application of blockchain, implementation of blockchain in the marketplace? And how do you think... How you doing? Okay. Is there an international standard for the implementation of blockchain in the industry, and how do you feel it will affect the country currently based on the standards we use? Thank you.
I mean, let me just take a step back and comment a little bit on cryptocurrency. Where all this started, everyone's obviously heard of cryptocurrency. I won't ask who invests in Bitcoin or Ripple or... why is cryptocurrency such a controversial issue? If you think about it, all of us have grown up in a world where the government or the central bank are the ones who control the creation of money. And then the central bank then grants the right to commercial banks who then have fractional banking so they can in fact create more money, right? And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say whoever controls creating money probably controls the world, right? So now you have a technology that comes along and says actually private actors can create money, At least they're trying to. So there's been 1,500 coins, and obviously you've all heard of the top coins, top cryptocurrencies on it. Now, in terms of a standard for it, I think we'll see over the next decade whether there is a standard. But I think the emerging technology that is the most compelling right now is the Ethereum. Right, so Ethereum is different than Bitcoin in the sense that Bitcoin is actually quite a simple technology. It's only really a currency, and it may fail at being a currency. It's not a useful currency for buying things. But Ethereum was designed with the concept of smart contracts embedded in it, so that you can have the business logic embedded. So most companies that are trying to do these things are building their smart contracts and their blockchain on the Ethereum principles.
Blockchain is a new technology worldwide, and I think cryptocurrency or financial sector have been the biggest adopter of blockchain technology, and we have seen some success stories of what Bitcoin or other currencies have been used for. But the biggest guys that have the biggest fear are the regulators, because it takes power off countries, take power off regulators, take powers off government, takes power off people. So it's going to be a hard sell. Even the Central Bank of Nigeria has said, don't do yet. Everybody watch out. They still cannot come to terms, right, with the fact that the regulatory powers over currency can be taken away from a body like Central Bank and managed by technology. The same thing will happen in the land registry, because there are institutions, there are laws of the land that supports the current paper type, very rigid system. Now, to take all those powers and give it to technology to manage, it will still take us some time in this land.
Yeah, no, I think exactly. I mean, I think that we're setting ourselves up for like the Titanic battle of the ages. As I said, people have always thought only governments can create money, and then certain private sector actors who have regulatory advantages. All of a sudden, other people are saying that we can control money. No central actor can control it, and it's controlled in effect by the people in some sense. And this is going to be a titanic battle. But let me ask you the following question. Would you rather have fiat money, Naira, which I was a little bit shocked when I learned this when I moved here, that the Naira used to be 1-to-1 to the pound, or worth more. So any individual that's held Naira for 30 years has seen the value reduced, 1/500th, right? From 1-to-1 to 500 to 1. Or would you rather hold Bitcoin, where there's a cap on how many Bitcoins, and no one can produce more Bitcoins? And I think that question, as it plays out, and exactly, the regulators are terrified of this. They don't know what to do, because they've always had the power, in effect, to regulate. And now all of a sudden, you've lost control. And let's be honest, I don't know which press is here, but the truth is that the way in a high inflation environment like this, what's happening is you're transferring wealth from the poor to the wealthy through the financial system, basically, right? I mean, it's just the way it works. And so when you have higher inflation, it's more punitive to the bottom of the pyramid. All of a sudden now you have a technology that threatens your ability to be the monopoly on creating money. I think that's an amazing thing. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know it throws up all sorts of questions for all of us on the way that these things function. And I hope 10 years we'll end up with something with a financial system that's more inclusive, that delivers better outcomes for the population. But yes, there is going to be a bruising battle ahead.